And so when we think of being over the top, we're talking about this idea of generosity because a lot of times when you go to church, you guys sometimes you go to big service, and we have this time during service where we talk about offering, right? When you guys think of offering, what do you guys think of you have to give? What do you have to give? Money, right? And so a lot of times we just talk about being generous with our money, but there's actually a lot of other things that we are called to be generous with as Christians. So last week, if you guys remember, we talked about how the first thing we need to do is to be generous with our time. That a lot of times we keep time to ourselves, or we feel like we're so busy. But as Christians, we're called to be generous with our time and see how we can give it as a gift to other people. And today, we're going to be talking about another thing we can be generous with. And you guys actually already started doing that in the way you shared about the gospel and Jesus. But today, we're going to talk about how we're supposed to be generous by sharing good news. How we don't just keep things to ourselves, but we share the good news to other people. And so we talk about generosity and the idea of over the top. I think the phrase over the top can mean a lot of different things. The first meaning for over the top is like something can be really extra. Okay, so I don't know if you drive around your neighborhood, you have like some normal houses in Bridgeland that like kind of put on one Halloween decoration, and then you have another one they might put like a little inflatable up or like a pumpkin. And then you have the ones that have like a full grown like werewolf that's animated, and you have a light show. Like that's extra, right? That is an over the top decoration. Or I don't know if any of you, your moms love to decorate your house. Okay, I've been in some very nice houses lately, and some of the decorations, while they're great, to me sometimes it's like over the top. There's a lot of false stuff. Down to like the scent and everything that like I was at one house where for like 3 hours in the day it was this scent, and then they programmed it to another scent and another scent to like help you with your mood. I don't know. There's a lot of extra things in homes. Another example of being over the top is I don't know if you've ever taken like a soda can and you shook it up and you opened it and it just overflows, or if you ever like filled too much up on food, or probably on Halloween when you eat too much candy, you go over the top with things. And I think another way of understanding over the top is that you exceeded your limit. Like you've done too much of this one thing. And so like when I think of over the top, I think of one time when I was in high school. Me and my parents, we would always go like once a month. We'd go to like the Chinese buffet in town. I don't know. My mom was like tired of cooking. We'd always go to the buffet in town, and it was my favorite time of the month because I got to eat as much food as I could. And I remember there was this one time in high school where like I was a pretty big kid, so I was eating like 6 plates. All right, it was a lot. But I remember one time I was like, we're at this buffet. I'm sitting down. I'm eating. It's great, and we're about to leave, and I feel like something in the back of my throat. I was like, this doesn't feel right, and I get up and I get really dizzy all of a sudden. I was like, I need to go to the bathroom, and like I was about to throw up. So pretty much like I ate too much. And like I was like, I don't know, I tried to like throw up in the bathroom. I couldn't. So I was like, okay, maybe I'm fine. I'm gonna go back in the car. So we get in the car and we're driving home. And I remember like the last 5 minutes, we get to our neighborhood, there's a little speed bump. My dad just goes over it, and right as the car lands, I throw up in the car, like with 6 people in the car. Disgusting, over the top. And so sometimes over the top can be a good thing. Sometimes you can go above and beyond and do something. But a lot of times over the top, being over the top can mean like you've done so much, you've like engorged yourself so much that you can't hold on to it anymore. Okay? I don't want you to have the image of vomit in your head. So we're gonna move on a little bit. But I think this is the idea that sometimes we get stuck with, is that we go to church, we go to Bible study, we pray, we do quiet time, we do all these things as followers of Jesus, but we really are not supposed to be a people that just fill up on Jesus. We're supposed to be a people that share the good news of Jesus. So when we think about food, like it's one thing, like I know Halloween's coming up. The next holiday is my favorite. It's Thanksgiving. Okay, Thanksgiving is not as fun if you prepare all this food for yourself and you sit there by yourself and eat everything. Okay, you might think it's fun for like the first 10 minutes, but then after that, probably not. But how much better is it to share a gigantic meal or a great experience or a memory with your friends rather than just experiencing it by yourself or keeping everything in by yourself? And so I know a lot of times we like to go to church, we like to learn, and we're like, okay, this is good for me. But I think as Christians, we are called to share our experiences with other people. We're supposed to share the good news of Jesus with other people. And so I want to go back to this verse that we went through last week, but it comes from 1 Thessalonians. It should be on there. And it says this. We got it? It says this. I don't think it's the right one. But, oh, no, it is. It is. It says this. It says, surely you remember, it starts a little bit later, surely you remember, brothers and sisters, our toil and hardship. We worked night and day in order not to be a burden to anyone while we preach the gospel of God to you. You are witnesses, and so is God, of how holy, righteous, and blameless we were among you who believed. For you know that we dealt with each of you as a father deals with his own children, encouraging, comforting, and urging you to live lives worthy of God, who calls you into his kingdom and glory. So you guys remember, this was written by a man named Paul, and Paul was writing to this church who was struggling with giving their time and giving the good news to other people. And so Paul reminded them that he always shared the good news of Jesus with them, that he didn't just tell them about the good news. It's not just like a vocal thing, but he showed them what it looked like to live it out by living with them and caring for them. And so, like it says, he says, I spent day and night showing the gospel to you and preaching the gospel to you, and you are all witnesses of how holy and righteous I was among you. And so Paul's whole mission was not to just make sure people knew about Jesus, but he wanted to show people how good Jesus was in every single part of the day, in each and every one of their lives. And so Paul generously gave everything away by showing and telling the Thessalonians what it looked like to follow Jesus. And I think that Paul shows us that we want others to experience and encounter Jesus' love the same way that we have. Some of you guys have went to camp. Some of you guys have done the call. You've been on a mission trip. Like, it's really cool to experience those things, but it doesn't really do any good if you don't tell anyone about it, right? If the next year comes by and we're like, hey, we want to go on a mission trip, and no one knows what a mission trip is, then the people that went on it didn't do a good job of telling about how good of an experience it is. I'm sure when you went to a camp, or when you saw a movie, or even when you had a crazy story, like, the first thing you want to do is you want to share it. You want to tell everyone else, yo, look what last night was crazy. This Halloween party was wild. Homecoming was crazy. I just saw this movie. Everyone needs to watch it. Like, there are a lot of things that we want to share. And as Christians, why would we not want to share how amazing Jesus is in every single part of our lives? And so there's a story in the book of Matthew that I want to go through. And it's about a family who had an experience with Jesus that was so over the top that they went and told everyone about it. And I'm gonna describe it to you. It's not gonna be on the screen, but this was at a time when Jesus is doing his ministry, and he's doing a lot of healings, right? So he's healing blind people and people with leprosy and skin conditions. And at this point, Jesus had been on his little tour, and he had done all of these healings, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, he's doing all of these miracles. And after doing some of these healings, Jesus encountered a local religious leader with a very sick daughter, and she was about to die. And in a last-ditch effort to help her, the man had sought Jesus out. But the sad thing is, while he left the house, while he was looking for Jesus in the city, his daughter had died. Okay, and so imagine just like the sadness and the anger and the frustration and like the desperation that this man had, just trying to get Jesus to help his daughter who had already died and passed away. And it says this. It says, when Jesus entered the synagogue leader's house and saw the noisy crowd and people playing pipes, he said, go away, the girl is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. And after the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took the girl by the hand, and she got up. And news of this spread through all of that region. So the reason why this story is over the top is for a couple things. Number one, in that time, if someone died, the custom and the law was that you weren't supposed to touch them or be near them or do anything with them. And the reason why people were there and like playing pipes and music was that it was kind of like a funeral. Like she's already passed on. This is over. And Jesus could have just been like, you know what? It's too late for her. I got all these other people who got easier things to do. I can help people not be blind and heal their skin. Like, rising from the dead is a whole nother thing. But the fact that Jesus says, no, I still have hope for this person. Like, when someone dies, that's kind of like there's no hope, right? You're like done. And for the father who was looking, he was trying to find a piece of hope left. And he almost knew that there was no hope that could be found. And Jesus goes in and he says, this is the important thing. This is the really important thing. Jesus says that she is not dead. She's just asleep. And in that time, even if she had been raised from the dead, people would still view her as like a dead person. They're like, oh, like Jesus did something for you, but like you still died, so we can't be around you, we can't touch you. So imagine for the rest of her life, like she'd pretty much be like, she's like the zombie girl in school. I don't know, like people would know that, oh, that was the one who died, and we cannot be around her or touch her. And so Jesus was like, you know what? I'm gonna go even further. I'm gonna be like, you know what? She is just asleep. I'm gonna wipe away all of her labels, all the things that people are defining her as. She is just asleep. And he goes inside and takes the girl's hand and, yes, like brings her back from the dead. But none of those other people realize that. And so the important thing is that Jesus did not have to do any of this. He could have just been like, you know what? She's died. She's gone. But he chose to do the over-the-top generous thing and make sure that this girl would have a life to live that would be free of judgment, free of definition, and any of these things. And this is the most important part, is the last verse in this. Middle school boys, we're good? Jackson, Bryson, you good? Okay. The last verse in verse 26, it says, news of this spread through all of that region. And I think this is the most important part of that passage, because Jesus could have raised this girl from the dead and no one could have seen it. And they could have been like, and everyone saw it and went away, or everyone saw it and was like, wow. But it says, news of this spread through all the region. I think that's the most important part of what Jesus does, is when something good happens, like we have, our first thing we should do is to share it with other people. I'm not just saying sharing the gospel of how Jesus died for us and all these things, but like there have been good things that have happened in your life, whether it was here on Sunday mornings or on a Wednesday night, or something that Jesus has done. And we would be doing other people a disservice if we didn't choose to share those things with other people. If we just kept Jesus in our hearts this entire time and didn't want to share that with other people, then we're just filling ourselves up on Jesus and not really helping anyone else. And so our number one goal as Christians is that we need to be generous with sharing the good news. And in the passage we looked at today, we saw that the encounter that this girl had with Jesus, she was transformed by it, and the desire to share the good news will naturally flow from it. So there's 3 questions I want you guys to think about that help us get started of thinking, what is the good news in my life that I can share? So the first question is, why is Jesus good news to me? Why is Jesus good news to me? I don't know what you think about when you think of Jesus. You probably think, oh, he loves me, he knows all these things. But Jesus should be good news. Like when you read about Jesus, when you hear about Jesus, you should be excited. It should be just as good as like receiving the text from someone that you've always wanted to receive a text from. Or when you win a football game. Or if the Astros won the World Series. Like that is good news. Sorry, it's a little too soon. But like that is all good news that we want to share. And Jesus should give us the same exact effect. And so last week we saw that being honest about how we spend our time is crucial. But we also need to be honest about who Jesus is to us. Like, is Jesus actually good news to me? Or am I just going through the motions and be like, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus? Like, do I actually get excited about Jesus? Whether we think the story of Jesus is good news in our lives, and we're able to say why, that is really important. The second thing we have to ask ourselves is, just like that little girl, how is Jesus healing me? How is Jesus actually doing things in my life that are changing my life? Just like the girl in Matthew's story and the lives of the Thessalonians, God is working in our lives to make beauty and goodness happen. And those are the places where we can see the good news working in our lives and sharing that experience with other people. And the last question, I think for all of us, this is the challenge as we go into smaller groups, is like, what is the one story that I can share this week about Jesus? Like, do I actually have stories about Jesus that I can share? And if you don't have stories about Jesus that you can share, then that should probably make you think about, am I actually choosing to notice Jesus in my life or not? Like, I think a lot of times we can learn about him. A lot of times we can talk about him, but there's a big difference in showing people who Jesus actually is. And so find something that God is doing in your life and share the good news about how Jesus has transformed you. Some weeks will be challenging. Some weeks will be not as big, but it doesn't really matter, because if Jesus really shows up in every part of our lives, that means we always have something to share about Jesus. And so I think the number one thing for y'all too is that it doesn't even have to be like, oh, I have to convert this person, or I have to make sure like I turn this person to Jesus. Sometimes in our sharing of Jesus, it's not really about telling people about the truth of Jesus, but it's just pointing people to Jesus. If people see that you're really, really happy, they're like, man, why are you always so happy all the time? Or why do you have such a positive attitude? Or even when you lose in a game, like how can you have such a good outlook on life? All we have to do is point people to Jesus. We can say, look, this is because I have Jesus in my life and I'm secure. This is because I do this because I love Jesus. Like these are the simple things that I think a lot of times we just don't think will do anything. Like we feel like we have to tell people, oh, Jesus died for you, all these things. But sometimes it's just saying, I have Jesus in my life and that's what makes me happy. I have Jesus in my life, that's what gives me peace. Or I have Jesus in my life and that's why I have healthy friendships. And a lot of people, I think, actually want those things, but they don't know how to get it. And if we just tell people, look, all you need is Jesus, then maybe God is going to work through that and show them who Jesus is to them. And so, actually, there's a really quick lesson in it because it's really a simple fact is I think for all of us in the small groups, I would love to talk about like, how can you share? I would love for you guys to actually just spend time sharing about what Jesus has done in your life and share good news to each other. I think that's the challenge today. And for some of you, it might be hard. For some of you, it might be easy. But I think it's important to be able to be generous with those things. And once we get into the practice of it and talking about how great Jesus is, then we're able to share it with a lot of other people. Okay? Sound good? Thumbs up? All right. I'm going to pray, and then we'll do small groups. 1, 2, 3. Dear God, I thank you so much again for this time. I thank you for all of these wonderful people. God, I thank you for all the things that you've done in our life that are good to us. And God, we just ask that you give us boldness and courage to share that with other people and to share just how amazing you are to other people. And so, God, I pray for us in our discussion and our small group. We thank you. We love you. In Jesus' name I pray.